if you want.
I've got two of
you've
my
put
own.
all the work.
So, yeah.
Oh, so you're saying it's my fault? Blaming me already? Wow.
I mean, straight in, doors open. It'll be insults next, and then it'll be all good.
Insults are fine. I'm used to those. That's okay.
Yeah, we got kids too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, we always end up laughing in the first couple of minutes, and they just go, how do we start on this?
Yeah,
that's the problem with not being a proper podcast. A proper podcast would have an introduction, and then Steve says something when he does his. That's kind of they're proper podcasts, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they kind of have an introduction and kind of welcome, and it even sometimes introduce their guests when they have guests, but we don't normally bother for ages. Yeah.
Well, I would say it's like hi, welcome. We're on the podcast. I'd like to introduce you to Andy. He's the most accomplished pencil drawer I've met, and he's the most persistent because what day are you on? 700 something?
Well, the number today was 684.
Yeah, every day.
But I did 30 days. I did 30 days before that because I did in October, but I didn't number it then.
So I mean, the progression from day one to day now is actually not that much. So I thought you'd have done better. But I'm really impressed.
He doesn't colour them in or anything, does he?
I've tried a couple of times. It's impressive.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah, never good at colouring. I didn't do geography to O level, so I was no good at colouring to the lines.
Yeah.
I do think you need to print them all out though, and then they can be a thing for someone else to colour in, because that would be already.
That'd be a great kids book.
Well, I've actually got. I was chatting yesterday because my attention grabber later, but I may as well slip now because.
I was going to say, if only we knew someone who could bind books.
Yeah, I did another bookbinding course workshop yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was talking with the tutor. There was only two of us plus the tutor, and I was talking about kind of my tutor's familiar with my work in terms of the drawing, and it was saying I've actually kind of got a thought, because for those who are watching on the video, just by my shoulders, there's some orange notebooks there, and then next there's a stack of black. Those are my sort of sketchbooks from the last nearly 2 years, and they're pretty ugly. I mean, they're cheap. £1 from Hobbycraft, and before inflation, I think £1.30 or £1.50 now. The cheapest ones I can get. I do one a month. It's a cheap hobby, but I'm thinking of, and I need to work out kind of how many to put into a sort of together. But I'm going to bind them, so I'm going to sew them, take the staples out, sew them together, create some sort of cover for them. I'm not sure whether to do kind of sort of 3 monthly or maybe 6 months or 4 months, and then kind of can have a title down the side. They can be a bit more attractive.
Well, just to show your progression level is, and your dogged persistence of it, and to have a new thing to draw every day. That's
that's been a struggle at times.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Inktober makes things like that make it easy. When I was doing it with Rob Thomas, and we were doing the kind of first year of drawing every day.
Yeah,
Rob kept delivering a new set of prompts every month, which made life a lot easier when somebody else delivers it. I've made things tricky for myself this month because I've kind of gone, I'm going to do each day, I'm going to do animals all month, and they're going to kind of have some linguistic connection, kind of either an end rhyme or a front rhyme. Just kind of, it's like, I think it was a few days ago, I kind of got back around to kind of, I can do catfish, and I can do cat. And then worked out that I did cats on the second day of the month. It's like, nope.
Well, here's an idea for you. Every week is a celebration of some kind of something. So I think we've just finished Shark Week, and I believe we're now in Elephant Week, or we're about to start into Elephant Week. And then next week is going to be, I don't know, platypus or whatever. It's but there's always something.
Yes, and it's also afternoon tea week this week.
Absolutely, yeah. That might.
Of course it is.
That's. I suppose it depends how creative is your brain. It's when you say afternoon tea in a sketch, what do you have? Do you draw a blank, or do you automatically have 10 things that pop into your
Surely
head?
it's going to, scones or cucumber sandwiches with the crust cut off, or tea set.
The difficulty for me is not the creativity in terms of the imagination. It's not creating. It's delivering that creativity in another format.
Yeah.
So I have a strong imagination, but sometimes, and this is having not really done art apart from the last 2 years. Prior to that, 30 plus years, nearly 40 years before that. The delivery isn't necessarily always as good.
So was the project to develop your drawing skills? Did you want to draw?
Yeah, I mean, I had this chat yesterday with my tutor and the other lady on the course, and the lady on course, because there was only one other, and we were talking about when I was in school, I had to drop I had to drop a lot of subjects. I mean, now it's not uncommon for kids nowadays to do 10 or 12 GCSEs.
Yeah.
When I was out in school, it was O levels that days. You did 8. That was it.
Yeah, I did 5.
So there were a few schools where they kind of 8 or 10 or something. But they tended to be the private schools with the better facilities and the more hours. But most schools, I didn't go to a great school. It was just standard comprehensive, really. And so I did 8. So by the time you've taken, you had no choice about maths to English.
Yeah.
You could actually do less sciences then. But for me, because I was like this, there was the 3 sciences, because that was a given. That left me with 2 other choices. And that's not really much in the way of options. And art was something I wanted to do, but I had to give it up.
Yeah.
And I I did. I literally gave it up. I gave up art as something to ever do. And although I did kind of every now and again, I do like most people. But I never bought a sketchbook. Never picked up a sketchbook. Never picked up any fancy pens or anything. It'd be doodling on the side of your meeting notes or on a post-it note or something like that. Until it was Inktober 2020. Yeah, Inktober 2020. I'd been chatting with Rob about it'd be nice to maybe do a bit of drawing. Because throughout my teaching career, I'd always kind of...
What was that, like 5 months into lockdown?
Excuse my poor drawings on the board. I'm not an artist, I'm a scientist. That was not a mantra, but that was a common kind of
thing. It's a good excuse,
yeah.
No, I was similar. It's I was raised in Barbados in their education system, which is kind of like England's education system 60 years ago. So there was still flogging at the school. It's if we got in trouble, we were put out into a lower garden to stand in the sun for an hour, kind of thing. And it's full trousers, button-up shirt, tie, all that kind of stuff. But I wasn't allowed to do art. As soon as you entered, you were put into categories, and I was put into the category of misbehaving. It was I got in a lot of trouble at school. I was not a good student, but I loved history. Absolutely loved history. Loved English. Hated math. Loved physics, ironically. So I ended up only doing 5. We call them CXCs in Barbados, but it's the same O-level equivalent. I did very poorly at high school. It wasn't until I went to university at 32 that I realized I actually had a brain. I did my maths and physics A levels, the ASN A2 in about 6 months, just from self-study. Cool. Got accepted to university, and I did a 4-year BEng degree because the first year was like a foundation degree. And it was, I was on the dean's list for most of it until the last year. And it was, I realized I actually had something in there that I could use, and I was really good at math, and I was really good at physics, and really good at calculations, and I became a civil engineer.
Cool.
It's maths and mud, isn't it? Basically,
yeah.
I've worked with a lot of civil engineers that. Yeah, it's. I used to work with a guy who did a maths degree, and then started working as a civil engineer. So they put him on a civil engineering degree as well.
Yeah.
So it's just maths and then maths and mud.
Yeah, they tried to get me to switch from civil engineering to maths, and it's I had a great professor called Martin Lavelle, I believe, and he actually gave me a real love of math. But it was he was like, "Well, come and join my program." And I'm just like, I don't really see anything fun or sexy about math, which I think quite offended him. And he's like, "Oh, my wife would definitely disagree with you." He's like, "I'm not your wife." And he's like, "You could be an accountant or an actuary." It's like, "You're not selling it." He's like, "You could make loads of money." It's like, it's.
Yeah, I could make buildings and bridges and.
Yeah, if my life was about making money, I would not be doing what I do. So it's my life is more about enjoyment of the pursuit and fulfilling whatever dream I have, and carrying it to its utmost ability that I can. It's never doing something a little bit; it's doing it all the way.
All in, yeah. That's a good way to live, I think.
Well, it might not be the most financially successful way to live, but it's very fulfilling, and it's I never have a day when I wish I should be doing something else. I never have a morning where I wake up, it's like, oh, I don't want to go to work, because I love what I do. And at each step in my life so far, I've been a soldier. I was in the U.S. Marine Corps, even though I'm not American. I've been a submarine pilot, commercial diver, scuba instructor. I taught English in Eastern Europe, civil engineer. I'm a project manager a lot of the time, doing building works, woodworker, carpenter. Now I'm a sculptor. I've been a sculptor now full-time for 5 years. It's at any point in time you told me in my life up to 5 years ago that I would become a professional artist, I would have laughed in your face, because they were so far from anything like that.
Yeah.
But you find that passion, that drive, that need to make something, create something, and you have to, if you're like me, you have to find a way. And it could be, I mean, I work in wood, but it could be in needlework, it could be in metal, it could be painting, it could be drawing. It's that need to get those inner thoughts or inner image that you have out into a real form.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
I think that's good. I was racking my brain trying to think who it was that I was listening to a few days ago, and they were saying about how they currently work, I think, predominantly in wood.
Yeah.
But they were asked, what is it wood specifically? And it was their answer was basically no. I want to create. I want to solve problems. I want to make things.
Yeah.
And I will use any material that I can. Wood just happens to be the material that I'm using right now. But if for some reason I can't use wood anymore, then I will just find a new material, a new medium, in order to sort of create.
Well, specifically, I love wood. I love the uniqueness of it, its individuality. It's you could have 10 different logs, or even 10 slabs, or 10 bits of store-bought wood. Make the same thing out of each piece, but each piece will also be subtly different just because of the character of the wood. I mean, you could say the same thing about stone, but it tends to be less obvious. But when it comes to doing something like something like this, have you can see this?
So like a sort of twist.
Yeah. So this is a Mobius.
Twist.
Sorry, I'm a bit close. So the Mobius is it's a three-dimensional structure with a single face. So wherever you start here and you trace it around, you're going to come back to that one spot. So it's only one-sided. So I make a lot of these out of wood, but I never start with wood. Oftentimes I'll start with a bit of string, a bit of paper. So to make a Mobius strip, you just cut a strip of paper, you put it together, you have got a solid circle. If you separate it, give it one twist, that's a Mobius strip. You trace it, you're going to twist inside and outside, you're going to come back to the same spot, so it's now a one-sided object. You twist it again, you've got a double Mobius. It looks very complicated, but it's still the same one-sided object. So once I get an idea, then I will look into something like clay.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Make them out of clay. And this is just a reference for me. So when I'm carving something, I'll look and say, okay, I need to come here, and then I do that. And I'll draw it a couple times too. But then when I'm drawing it, I usually draw it. I try to draw it from all sides and with different proportions and different features. So none of the drawings will, like, you wouldn't look at the drawings and see a series of drawings. You'd see 8 different drawings of 8 different objects. But for me, it's all the same object that I'm looking at in different ways. So then when it comes to getting a piece of wood and I start carving it, I'm going to find different things in the wood. I could find cracks, I could find voids, I could find rot, I could find metal, I could find all these different things inside of like a tree trunk. But I've already thought of 10 different ways to cut this. So as soon as I find something like that, then I just change my plan a little bit, and I can just go on. It isn't a big, oh my goodness, what's happening now? I can just carry on, and it's much more of a freestyle way of carving. So I don't have okay, I need to carve this. It's like, I need to carve an idea of this. So it's different. When I first started carving, I did a lot of figurative sculpture, very much on human anatomy. And human anatomy, if you want accurate, needs to be quite proportionate. So then you run into these defects in the wood. It's like, oh, what do? I either leave the defect there, I pack it with something, or I start again. And I saw, which was if you spend a lot of time making a sculpture, and all of a sudden you run into one of these anomalies, it can be quite disheartening, because you might have spent 10, 20, 30 hours, 40 hours into something. And then all of a sudden the idea is gone, because you've stuck to that one rigid idea. But if you allow for that potential of a void, a potential of a crack, and think your way through it, when it does happen, it's like a little beautiful blessing rather than a problem. And it's like, oh, this is the thing that's going to be actually really unique about this piece of wood. So instead of then trying to fix it or hide it, I'll then highlight that specific spot.
So I'm curious. I want to almost step back a bit, because I mean, as much as as you know, I've done a bit of carving, although not recently. I really should get back into it. The work you do is amazing. Kind of, just trying to create something like a Mobius strip. Like, I mean, I've looked at some of your work and I've gone, I get the maths of it. Yeah. Mathematical, scientific background as well. I kind of understand what Mobius strip is, but I think actually to create that is kind of just hard work. But I want to step back a bit further.
Sure.
Because you've gone through kind of you've had a range of careers. You said you, like me, you had to drop art in school.
Yes.
You were really given the option of doing art, and you clearly have had a very interesting career doing a variety of things, none of which would be in everyday situation kind of regarded as anything creative or art-like. You've kind of got
Not at all, no.
So where did the art? Were you always kind of just drawing and doodling and making stuff out of clay or wood?
No.
When did you go from kind of I'm leading? I'm doing these very, I would say, adventurous and interesting jobs.
I should say that all seem to revolve around creative problem solving, though. There's a lot of creative thought on a daily basis.
Yeah,
potentially. It's. I've always been involved in being from Barbados. I've always been in and around the water. I was a really big free diver when I was young. I started doing scuba diving when I was like 8. Was an instructor for a long time. And I traveled a lot. It was with my family. My father moved us a lot. So I've lived in many countries all over the world. As you can tell, my accent is mutt. It's a little bit from everywhere. So no, I'm not American. Yes, I have Canadian citizenship. Yes, I've also got English citizenship. I've also got Barbadian citizenship. And I'm a resident of America. But I've been in England now for 15 years. I consider this my home. Love it here. People who say, how could I live in England as opposed to Barbados? It's like, go and live in Barbados for 6 months and come back and talk to me. You go and use a chainsaw in 40-degree heat with 100% humidity for 8 hours, and then we can have a chat. Barbados is beautiful. The beaches are lovely. But once the beaches are over, like after your 2 weeks or 3 weeks honeymoon with the beaches, there's not that much else to do. There's no real parks. There's no real walks. There's no waterfalls. There's no lakes. There's no gardens. The shopping's not great. So it's for a tourist destination, it's fantastic. But to live there can be. My first thought would be boring. I was a big surfer when I was young, so I'd spent whenever I wasn't at school or working, I was surfing. But even that, if there's no waves, and you might not get waves for 6 months, it's like, well, what else do you do?
Yeah, there's a lot of like music and art and things over there as well. Though, it's my understanding.
Yeah, but I was never into music. I was definitely never into art. My path to art, if I can think back, would start when I was a commercial diver, and I was working on oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. And I'd always wanted to draw. My eldest sister, she is an amazing self-taught artist. She's done a few coloring books, and she's one of those people who will make you a birthday card, and it's so, even just the envelope is so decorated, you don't even want to open it because you don't want to damage it. Yeah. And I've always been a little bit jealous and definitely envious of her ability. So I heard about this book called Drawing on the Right-Hand Side of the Brain. And it was gifted to me. I took it onto the oil rig, and I spent 2 weeks, because we were working 12-hour shifts. 6 hours of each of those shifts, I'd be in a decompression chamber, practicing drawing. And you can't take paper into a decompression chamber. It was on these like plastic tablets. And there's nothing else to draw in there. So I was drawing my hand. I was drawing my foot. I was drawing the portholes in there. I was drawing the instruments inside the decompression chamber. And I was very interested in getting it as accurate as possible. So I was able to eventually be able to draw realistic images. It took me a long time though. And then I got quite hurt on an oil rig once. I got my right hand crushed. I broke 4 bones in my hand. I crushed 4 fingers in my hand. One of my fingers was telescoped into my hand. And I didn't think I was going to ever have the use of my hand again. But it turns out I got a good doctor. And while I was rehabilitating for it, a friend of mine who I went to commercial diving school with had moved to Hawaii. And she was working for a company out there called Atlantis Submarines, which is a tourist submarine. It's a real battery-powered submarine, goes down to like 50 meters, takes 48 people. And she's like, well, they're looking for people. Do you want a job? And I'm like, yeah. I was on a plane like 3 days later, moved to Maui.
Nice.
And I was in Maui for a couple of years. And while I was there, I tried to continue the drawing thing. I was doing people, I was doing faces, I was trying to draw dolphins, draw the landscape there. But it was, I didn't really have any drive for it. I wasn't a passion. It was more something I felt I needed to do. And that was kind of the end of my whole art foyer. So that year, I'm talking, I left there just after the World Trade Center happened. So you're talking,
early noughties.
Yeah. So it was like 2001.
Yes.
It was a while ago. But then I moved back to Barbados, back to diving. Then I got a chance to move here, came to England I was doing, I actually worked for a modeling agency and a stunt company called Extreme Force. And because I was ex-military, we would be used as extras in movies because we knew how to use all the guns, we knew how to wear all the gear. So it was it got to be in a few movies, nothing that you've ever heard of, I guarantee. And even if you did see one of them, I'm probably in it for like a half a second. I'd be like a SWAT guy running into a building or somebody dead on the floor kind of thing. And I found that, again, incredibly boring. We were making about £500 a day, which was great money, but you had to be there from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 p.m.
Yep.
And just sit there and wait and hope maybe you get called. 5 days a week. That was it. Just sit there. It's like, this is not for me. So then I got another friend who lived in Poland. She said, well, why don't you come and teach English? So I was like, yeah, okay. 2 days later, I moved to Poland and started teaching English. I've never taught English before. As I mentioned before, I did not do good at English in high school, but I just did conversational English. And so my job was just to go with, and it wasn't for children per se, it was for executives. And I'd go to the main central bank and talk to their CEO for 3 hours, just like we're doing now. I'd charge you, £100 for this. And then that expanded quite a bit. So pretty soon I was working for 7 different schools, and I was working between Warsaw and Czech Republic. And then we had a few issues with my family, so I moved back to Barbados, back into diving, back into commercial diving, and I got sponsored by a civil engineering company to come to the UK and do my civil engineering degree, because it's by this time I'd kind of taken over. I had my own crew of divers, and I was running the jobs. And while I was at university here in Plymouth, Halcro was bought out and became CH2M Hill, I believe, who did not want a 35-year-old diver with pretensions of being a civil engineer working for them. So it was that kind of scuppered that plan. But in that time, I'd had 2 kids. So my ex-wife at the time, she had a very good job. And even if I got to the top whack as a civil engineer, I could not compete even by half with her salary. So I became a stay-at-home dad. But I can't do nothing ever. Even going to the beach and just relaxing there is kind of impossible. So I started doing the whole roof garden thing I mentioned before. And then each time I made something, it had to be better. And I wanted to expand on it. And that started I became like a subcontractor. I started doing odd jobs for my neighbors, for pubs, for restaurants, which is how I got into carving. Because I saw somebody had made like a little personal sign for somebody, a little carved sign, and they were so happy with it. And I thought, I can do that. But I didn't know how to carve. So it's I went and I had a router, and I looked at, well, how do I make a sign with a router? And you could get those little templates, letter templates.
Yeah.
I think I did one sign with those and threw it away. As in the template set, I just thought it was rubbish. Because you're restricted to the size of a letter, you're restricted to the font, and you have to set each letter, and it's just what a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked on YouTube, and I saw there was a YouTube channel called Make a Wood Sign, which showed people how to freehand route. So you could literally carve letters with a router. And I got all into that. And within a few days of binge watching like 500 videos, I was making my first signs and giving them to all my old clients. After about 6 months of that, I got to the point where I was carving them, I was hand painting them, I was watching old Bob Ross painting videos, trying to figure out how to paint, how to draw, how to do artwork. Still carving every day. I was carving multiple signs and selling them. Got asked to do some shows and exhibitions. And so I started going and doing live carving at trade shows and agricultural shows. But like with everything else, I was never satisfied with just that kind of carving. So, because it was never quite as crisp as I wanted. It was never as perfect as I wanted. So then I started adding in knives and chisels. And as soon as I started that, a bit of a new world opened up. And I started to make these flat 2D signs. I wanted them to be more 3D. So then there was another big learning jump. And then as soon as I started making 3D signs, it's like, oh, well, why can't I do face? Or why can't, like, I think my first carvings were abstract, much as I'm doing now, but they're talking 5-7 years ago.
I thought that was going to be a perfect kind of link in, you've done 2D, you've done 3D, so now 4D for the Mobius.
No, there was a whole big learning curve between there, because my brain didn't see in 3D very well. So it's it was a real challenge for me to go from a 2D to a 3D image, and but I'm kind of driven and obsessed. And so I would try something, and if it didn't work, I would always complete it and look at, well, how did that not work? What else could I do to have made that better? And I would keep it next to me, so when I would do the same thing again, and try to skip that mistake, which of course just led me to more mistakes.
Process.
Yeah, but then I would just keep. I mean, I still do it now. It's in between each sculpture I do, I generally whittle something. So I'll do little faces, and it's I do like loads of them.
Fantastic. The sort of Nordic tradition, those.
Yeah.
But a lot of time when I'm going through, where I live in a Plimstock, when I go, I take the dogs. I've got 2 dogs. Taking the brook, I just take these and go stick them in the woods. I'll stick them in the tree. But that got me a contract with the National Trust, and I did 10 big, large faces for them, which they then stuck in. This was just before pandemic. They stuck them in trees to make a wood wizard trail.
Nice.
But some of the faces were a little scary, especially for small children walking through the woods at night to be looking for some kind of demonic witch face in a dark hole. So it was in retrospect, I should have made them happier.
They've got to learn at some point.
Yeah, learn to scream at the woods. Great.
Exactly.
Yeah, but whatever, and I keep switching. I'll do. Oh, before I jump ahead, so it's So then I wanted to make more realistic sculptures. So I picked up a mallet and a chisel. Never had any idea how to use them. Watched a few videos and just started. I was like, okay, well, looks like where shoulders need to go. This looks like where this needs to go, and I just kept working at it. It's it might sound quick or trivial, but it's you're talking like I would spend 50 or 100 hours trying to get one shape right, and then if I had to do it 10 times over, I would till I could get it to where I wanted it to. It's the bigger the sculptures got, then of course the more complicated I wanted, or the more realistic I wanted to do. I started adding muscle texture and pores and like lines. I went to the point where I was trying to do because I'd use people I knew as examples, where maybe they had a mole or a stretch mark. I would try to add that in, which is quite tricky and rarely worked. But it was I would have it in my head that to recreate this, I needed to add all these things in, which was great learning, but didn't do well for selling them. Then I got into shells quite strongly. You used one of my shells in one of the pictures.
Yes. Yeah, I love that piece.
Oh, those bloody shells. They are definitely the most complicated thing I think I've ever made. Because they're not a single piece of wood. Those are laminated together. And they are 25 to 40 segments of wood, all cut and glued together. And the inside and the outside replicate a real shell. So it's the same inside. So it's hollow all the way to the top. It's sanded all the way to the top on the inside. Because I wanted to make it as realistic as possible. And the first one took me 40, 50 hours. It was, there was just to make something that was, this big, that just looked like a shell. That when I would do a show and I put it there, people didn't actually believe it was wood. They just thought it was a shell. And then it's, how do you sell something that's this big that just looks like a shell that's taken you 50 hours? So I didn't, I sold a few of them, gave a couple away, but mostly I use them when I do shows and demonstrations as examples. I was approached by the Tate in St. Ives, and they wanted a big one, like the size of a small car, to use as a exhibition piece, but at my cost. And they're quite happy to share my name. I could come and talk about it, but I had to pay for it. I'm like, it's like this. It cost me like £15,000.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that was a no.
Yeah, understandable.
But then I started, okay, well, why am I going to all this work making these segmented shells? And then I started carving them out of solid blocks of wood. And around that time, I started getting students who wanted to learn to carve, which I always thought was funny because I thought I was a student. And I think I'm still a student. I don't think I'll ever stop learning or seeing something. It's like, oh my God, how do I do that? And spending a ridiculous amount of time trying to learn how to do it. But there was a lot of steps that I could show people. There was, it's around the same time I started the YouTube channel to try to show people how I learned to freehand route and to mitigate all the mistakes I made and all the preconceptions I had first. So whenever I do a YouTube video or my Instagram stuff, very rarely will you see me, because it's not about me. It's about what I'm trying to do, or the tools I'm using, or how I'm using them. It's sometimes when I see a lot of the Instagram videos or YouTube videos, and the first thing is like, "Hi, this is me." It's like, yeah, I click off. I'd much rather see what are you trying to do? What's your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? Is it about you or is it about what you're trying to do? And I'd like to show people that it's you don't need fancy tools. You don't need a big amazing workshop. All you need is a piece of 2x4 from B&Q, a knife, and you can make pretty much anything you want. It's just, are you willing to put the time in that it's going to take to learn how to do that? And one of the first things I'll get from a student is like, oh, I would like to be able to carve this by the end of the week. And I was like, okay, well, let's just step back a little bit, and we'll use a knife first and figure out how to use a knife, how to use it safely, how to use a chisel, how to use it safely, how to use a mallet, and it's guys can be quite tricky to teach the first fundamentals of carving because they have a preconceived notion of how to do it. And it's like, okay, I'm big, I'm strong, I'm just going to whack the hell out of this thing, and it's all going to be perfect. It's like, well, no, it's gentle, it's soft, you're not going to take off cubic meters of a piece of wood first. You just want to take off little slivers. And I find that the females that I've taught are they're not. They're much more, they tend to grasp the concepts more because I don't think they have a preconceived notion of they have to be strong with it. They can see the beauty in the lines, and they don't have, they don't need to brute force anything. Not that men are better or worse carvers or women are better or worse carvers. Just, I found that the teaching approach has to be quite different. So it's, with ladies, I'll tend to use the more aggressive tools sooner because they will tend to have more thought about what they're doing. Where the guys, I'll tend to give them butter knives for ages before I give them anything sharp. Because if I give them something sharp, they're going to cut something. But that is a bit of a generalization. I apologize for everybody I just offended.
It's interesting because that's something that Steve from Moonshine Metalworks, who's just been in the chat briefly then, that's an observation he's had when teaching blacksmithing.
Okay.
In that quite often, if he's teaching the same concepts to guys who are used to using hammers for knocking nails in or things like that, quite often he's got to teach them how not to use the hammer. Try and train them out of bad habits or behavior patterns that don't mesh with what he's trying to teach them. Even down to holding a hammer differently for blacksmithing versus, a claw hammer for smacking the crap out of a lot of nails. And that's an observation that he's made is that whenever he's taught any women to blacksmith, or anyone who's not stereotypical bloke type, they tend to pick it up much easier because they'll listen and they'll go through the steps with a little more thought or care or understanding of what you've given them in terms of instruction, rather than those preconceived notions or previous experiences.
Yeah. As one of the big ones, I probably have 10 different mallets in here. And excuse me, this one's hickory, probably my heaviest one. It's hickory and oak. It's probably 1.5 kilos. Quite a heavy duty thing. And so when people pick this one up, they're like, oh, you could really smack that one. It's like, well, I probably do the gentlest taps with this one.
Yeah.
I barely even tap little touches. For the lightest one, which I have, which is pine, that's the one I wail the hell out of things with.
It's different in control, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's the tools I have and use are not necessarily how you would use them at first glance.
Mm.
And then, of course, everything's got to be sharp. It's a dull tool is a dangerous tool.
Yeah.
So if things are sharp enough, then you shouldn't have to beat on anything hard. If you're using a chisel or a knife, you should be able to, at the very least, shave with it.
Mm.
You should be able to slide a chisel on the end grain of a piece of pine and get a nice thin, clean shaving. And then for carving, it's perfect. If it gets dull and damaged, that's when I find accidents happen.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the same with anything, isn't it? With with cooking or carving or just general removing any material from any other material.
Yeah,
the appropriate tool
is a great example of that. Yeah, if you're trying to cut a piece of paper or board, you want that to be an exact size. You want that to be a clean cut.
Yeah.
The blade's not sharp; it will just drag the paper. And paper is paper's an everyday thing.
Really abrasive.
We cut it.
Mm-hmm.
It's something. It really takes it out on blades, and and because it's organic nature, and the way if the fibers lie because of the manufacturing processes, whether that's handmade paper or whether it's manufactured paper, which has a much more definite grain to it.
Yeah.
The cut can really kind of be very different if you haven't got a sharp knife.
Yeah, most definitely.
I think it's underrated. I was watching Laura Kampf's video this afternoon. Her classical, it was a workshop tour, and a while ago she made a sharpening station.
Okay.
So basically, it's a box on the wall, and you open up the box, and you've got a bit of a platform, and then straight away there's something like a Tormek. So you've got everything you need for sharpening. All the jigs, everything are there within that box. There's a nice little light which comes on as soon as the door comes down. And she said, I haven't actually used this since I made it, and it was sometime last year. I just think, okay, well, I mean, to play fair with Laura, does she use either other sharpening things? And this was just a sharpening station that she hadn't made, but she already has other sharpening facility that she uses because it's quicker, easier, or is she very much kind of, a lot of the time she's using disposable type materials or power tools, so the sharpening element is perhaps slightly different. So I'm not in any way having to go at Laura because I think the work is fabulous, but just like I think it's like a sharpening is like one of those things that people tend to forget about. I'm going to buy some tools. I'm going to buy some chisels.
Mm.
Yeah, you need to keep those sharp. You probably will need to sharpen them before you can actually use them.
Yeah, there's very few chisels you can get from a store that are actually sharp. It's I do have a Tormek T4, which was I got sponsored by Tormek via Axminster when I was carving all the NHS plaques, and they'd asked me what is one of the biggest drawbacks to what I was doing, because I was carving 3 plaques a day, 3 plaques every 2 days, out of pine and with chisels. So it was they would take a beating, and I was like, well, for every 10 minutes of carving, you got to spend a few minutes sharpening. And they're like, what, every day? It's like, well, no, every hour. So if I carve for 10 hours, so you're an hour to 2 hours of sharpening in between that. So they got Tormek to sponsor me with a T4. And when I first got it, I was like, what a piece of, I can't use this. But then I read the instruction manual. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I can. And then it does take a little bit of a practice to use it properly. But you can get them beautifully sharp. And so I would use the Tormek to get them to close to what I wanted, and then I would just finish them by hand. But the Tormek would take away 95% of the heavy work.
Yeah.
So instead of doing like 45 minutes per chisel, and I would usually use 5 or 6 different ones, it would be 5 minutes per chisel. So, and if you add that up over a year and a half, times 736 plaques that took roughly 6 hours each. It's I saved a lot of time.
Yeah, the work you did on that was fantastic. Yeah, for those who are listening who aren't familiar with that, you basically produced kind of like a plaque, which basically kind of had a cross between the NHS symbol and kind of almost the Superman type sort of symbol. Which you sent to hospitals, and you inspired other people to do the same thing as well, because obviously there's a large number of hospitals and medical facilities in the UK all under the NHS. So during the sort of lockdown, and just fantastic work, absolutely.
Yeah, it was. It didn't start out. There was no plan behind it initially. It started off. One of my students was quite elderly, a lady named Pat, who was lovely, but she went into hospital. Well, we had lockdown, and she went into hospital, and she was quite distressed that she would no longer be coming to her carving lessons. So I did a little video on an NHS plaque, just like a small, like 6-inch thing, for her to have something to do when she got out of hospital. And it was, I posted that on Facebook, and a friend of mine who worked at my local hospital, Derryford, she's like, "Oh, could you do a bigger one for us? We'd love to have one." So I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not? I'm in lockdown." Posted that one on to Facebook, and that was kind of where I went a little crazy, because that second plaque I did got shared or liked or commented on about 500,000 times in a week, and I was getting messages 24 hours a day. It's like, "Could you make one for us? Make the one for us." So I then said, "Okay, well, I'm going to make a few for Plymouth. We've got a few hospitals here, a few ambulance services. So I was going to make 10. So started making them. And the odd thing was, when I was finished them, I couldn't even take them to the hospital because we couldn't drive anywhere.
Yeah.
So ambulances were coming to my house and picking up these plaques that were sealed in bags, and I had to wipe them down with alcohol, and they would go into the plaque would go into quarantine. The plaque would have to go into quarantine for 3 days before it was even allowed to be given to the hospital. So an ambulance would come, pick up this thing, massively social distance. They would carry it almost like nuclear bomb with like tongs, kind of Bugs Bunny stuff. Put into the back of the ambulance, strap it onto the gurney, and then take off. And then 3 hours later, another ambulance would come for another plaque. I don't know what my neighbors thought was happening, because they were probably getting 4 or 5 ambulances to my house a week. Had a few fire engines stop, had police come a couple times and stop, because as people were doing the rounds and everybody was getting an idea of what was happening, anybody who was traveling via where I lived would stop by and pick one up and deliver it. It's I met some amazing people who were. I had one. Somebody came and picked it up from here and delivered it to York. It was because they had to go there for medical reasons, and it was. I don't know if they actually did the whole trip, but it went via this whole chain of different ambulances or what have you, from 400 miles, 500 miles, and we did. So in the end, I did personally about 536 plaques, but it wasn't just for. It wasn't just NHS. I did them for ambulances and care homes. Other medical facilities, and instead of just carving NHS, if they had their own specific acronym, it's like some of them like a TASC for the ambulance service, or Southwest Ambulance Service was SWASC. It made it a bit more interesting after carving them for 5,000 hours. I was like, please just give me some other word Work to card. And then I posted it on Facebook, on the Woodworking UK and the Wood Club, and people all over the UK jumped in and helped out their time. Some people offered their CNCs. Some people were doing it with laser, and just getting it out to whatever hospital they were there. So as far as I know, because I was not able to keep track of all of them, because people then took it on, were just doing it themselves. I think we got to 736 different NHS facilities across the UK, from the Isles of Scilly to Scotland. Never got over to Northern Ireland at all. Even though we did try to contact them, they never got back to us. And I think the only reason they stopped is because I ran out of money. Because it was all donation, it was all charity. I actually took out a loan so I could finish doing it. And it was a person was like, yeah, it became enough.
Yeah.
Understandably.
But it was very cathartic too, because it was I had a huge amount of loss from the year before COVID to up to last year, where I lost 6 family members, all non-COVID. I lost the entire top echelon of my family. So my mother, my grandfather, my uncles, my second father, my grandfather's like lifelong friend. It was horrendous. It seemed like every couple months we'd lose somebody else who was like integral to my life. And that really gave me something to focus on. And the fact that I was carving things, making people happy, I was helping me deal with my own grief. And I was able to, my girlfriend got involved with it, and she was helping in every way she could. Kids got into it, neighbors got into it, woodworkers got into it. And I knew my mom would have been proud of it. So it was that got me through a very, very hard spot.
So I would imagine.
Yeah, would I do it again? Ooh, I don't know. Probably.
Creativity is often one of those things that people can benefit from in sort of difficult times. And I think maybe it sometimes may be harder for people who don't have that release. Yeah, I mean, as people play video games or whatever, but I think it's. I mean, the whole men's shed kind of organization is almost built on that kind of idea of, I mean, there's the issues of men's mental health and how men respond to mental health difficulties or not, particularly older men, kind of have lived through that kind of idea of, men don't cry. And then if they lose their kind of lifelong partner and, suddenly they're on their own, which is a common story. Not it's not the only story, but it's a common story in the men's sheds type organizations.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think grief is something that everyone sooner or later has to deal with. And it can be, I don't think it's a small thing for anyone. I think some people are much better maybe at displaying their level of grief. And some people are very good at hiding it. Where I think that can be hard, almost destructive. I think that it's good to address and touch on those nerves, those raw feelings.
Work through the emotion of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with my mom. It took a year where even I actually distanced myself a bit from my girlfriend and my kids because I wasn't able to. I didn't want to touch those memories. Yeah. So maybe they would be doing something like playing a board game that I used to do with my mom. I didn't want to play because it just took me back into that memory. and she kind of metaphorically slapped me in the face and told me I was being a child. She did it a much nicer way than that, but it was it made me realize I was not living up to my mom's memory. It was she would never want me to distance myself or be sad with her passing. In fact, she'd probably be pissed at me. So it's when I realized that I started to. It's almost like you need to view the memories in a different way, and step out of yourself and try to look at the happiness in them, rather than feeling that overwhelming sadness inside. And if you can almost kind of refigure that memory in your head, it's no longer a point of pain. It can be a point of whimsy, maybe make you smile. And that's step one, getting out of that grief cycle.
Absolutely. I think it's such an individual thing as well, that something like grief is such a difficult thing for. There's no sort of one-size-fits-all template for how to process it. Every one of us is going to process it in our own way, in how it works for us. With so many layered memories of people we're grieving, and those interconnections between that and daily life as well.
It's like initially when we first had some of the losses, people were, of course, encouraging me to talk about it, but that was literally the last thing I wanted to do. Didn't want to talk about it at all. And if I did talk about it, it was very flippant. Because again, I was just dodging the thoughts. But again, but even before that, being in the Marine Corps, Marine Corps is not a gentle occupation. And I know, and I've worked with quite a few ex-military and ex-police who have dealt with some kind of PTSD, and can be very cathartic and therapeutic to use your hands. And I can carve. Sometimes I'll get into a carving, and 8 hours will pass, and I'll think it's half an hour. I'll go into the workshop. It's it's dark in the morning. Come back out and it's still dark. It's like, I'm not being there very long. Realize an entire day's passed, and I've just been carving away. And it does help you to forget, but it also, you get a amazing sense of accomplishment, because when you're being creative, whether it's woodworking or drawing or pottery, it's to be able to have made something and you can see the results, the fruits of your work for that day in a tangible way. It's there is a satisfaction that can be found in that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
I think it's a point which is maybe lost on some, but I particularly thinking almost things like how schools run, and the way we hear a lot of complaints, some of them not necessarily justified, of things like what the Americans call shop class, we call sort of design technology in the UK, being cut, and there is an element of truth behind that, like most stories, but often the reality of the story is not quite what perhaps the media want to present. It isn't. I think we still suffer though in the UK. And probably a significant portion of the Western world. I can't comment beyond that, really, of sending people down the kind of route of your academic, you're going to use sciences, languages, you're artistic, so you'll go down the kind of the art route, and you're the makers, and almost kind of segregating. I mean, you talked about kind of your school segregated people into kind of the lanes they were going to stick to, potentially for the rest of their lives. And I've talked about kind of having to give up things and not take those options. And I kind of almost think like we need to not do that. I think in some respects, I would almost like to see kind of GCSEs got rid of that. And yeah, all kids in the UK have to stay pretty much now till they're 18. Yes, they can get jobs from 16, but the majority of kids now stay in school till they're 18, one way or another. So get rid of GCSEs, keep the options wide, let people learn to make stuff at a higher level than if they're giving it up at 13 or 14 to choose a limited number of options. Get rid of that. Just keep everything going. Let people make things. Let people be creative. Let them also study sciences or learn languages. And they have to keep maths going to 16 anyway. But give that variety, give that breadth, so that there's that. People aren't losing out on art because their teacher has decided you're not going to be good enough to get the top grades at GCSE, therefore we're not going to let you carry on to do a GCSE.
Or just even consider music.
Yeah.
And how many schools are cutting like my son, he loves to play the piano. And at his school he's got quite a good class there. Have to pay for it, which is quite expensive. So it's not even something that the school offers, is offered in school.
Yep.
But then to try to get him any outside help now is almost impossible. Nobody teaches music anymore. Outside of a school, to find a private tutor is almost impossible. It's especially with piano. Although to be fair, I wouldn't want to teach piano, but it's I think that the people just hearing Twinkle Twinkle every day would just drive me. But for everybody's passion, there must be a level of interest in that. And there has to be a way that we can keep these things alive and not let them all just be consigned to electronic history, where the only way you'll learn is by watching YouTube. When I was at university, because I had to learn math, because I didn't do math very well at high school. When I was doing my A-level maths, I had to teach myself. And I actually bought a bunch of the Dummies Guides to Math, Dummies Guides to Algebra, Dummies Guides to Statistics and Trigonometry. And I went through them 3, 4, 5 times and learned math. But I didn't learn math the way they were trying to teach me at school. It's the Dummies Guides were probably the best teacher I had, because they taught me the why of it rather than just do this.
Remember this,
And so I was able to build on each thing, which I thought, well, isn't that kind of the point of school? And even when I look back at what my kids are doing now, they don't do that. It's like, just believe me when I tell you 2 times 2 is 4. And they ask, well, they're kids, they're annoying. They'll ask why. It's like, because it is. And I think, well, why? And if you can answer the why question, that leaves a much better grounding for the next questions that come. And if you have enough of that grounding, pretty soon you don't necessarily need that help to answer the question, because you can figure it out yourself, because you've made a good progression. And I think that kind of goes with everything. That goes with learning how to draw. It's I wasn't able to draw a full-size tree the first time I did it. It took me 100 goes of learning how to draw, a ball, and then a square, and then being able to put all those different steps together. Then finally I could do a tree. Carving a Mobius. First time I tried it, did not go well. Did not go well at all. That night it went so badly. This was my first proper one. I made out of a chunk of cedar. And even this, it was to try to figure out how to twist the wood and have it come back on itself. I didn't find easy. And even now, when I'm carving, because I'm carving some of these Mobiuses quite big, they're 10, 15 feet tall. I'll use quite a long chainsaw. When I'm carving to them, I'm actually carving both sides of the tree at the same time. So I'm carving the face I'm looking at and the back side of it as well. So I need to be looking at myself carving and getting my brain to figure out, okay, if I'm doing this, what's happening over here, and I need to change this angle like that. And every now and then I'll need to stop and put the chainsaw down and cry, and then pick the chainsaw back up and it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and try. But if I hadn't done all the little ones and made them out of clay and made them out of paper and researched what is a Mobius and what's the point and how is it going to change, and thought of 100 different examples of it, I wouldn't be able to carve one out of this. So it's the only thing I say, there's no shortcut. There's no shortcut. The only way to do something and do it well is to do it well from the first time and learn how to do it well. Otherwise, you're never going to be happy with the result. But if you do practice and you learn how to do it well, by the time you're doing it well, I'm going to be progressed way past where you ever thought you were going to be. And it's like, I don't think I'm at the top of my game. For me, I've been doing abstract carvings now for 8 months. Yeah, it's when I had to do a contract in Barbados at the end of last year. Before that, I was doing figurative, doing Groots. I was doing faces. I was doing animals, owls. Came back and was like, nope, I want to do something completely different. So I carved my first abstract. That did not go well. Second one, not too good. Third one I sold. Fourth one I sold. Fifth one I sold. And each time I did it, I made them more and more complicated. My Instagram blew up. I went from, I think, maybe having 500 followers on Instagram to 7,000 in 5 months. It was, although if I wish I got at least 10% of the people who looked at my stuff would follow, because then I would definitely,
yeah,
I'd have a lot more. But then I get to the point where people will say, it's like, oh, you've got such great natural talent. I'm like, what? I don't have natural talent.
Masses and masses of work and practice and learning. And
yeah, if I say if I had natural talent, that it kind of discredits everything that's gone before. Yeah. It's like when you see like a football player like Beckham, or I don't watch football, so whoever's a other good player, can kick a ball around people and score a goal. That's not the first time he's done it. That's probably the 10 millionth time he's done that shot. Yeah. He's probably done that for hundreds of hours a week.
I'm trying to remember the book. I'm pretty sure it's one of Matthew Syed's books, like Black Box Thinking, or I don't think it was Black Box Thinking, but it was one of his books, I'm sure. And it talked about Beckham specifically.
Okay.
And how he kind of, as a child, he would go home, and after school, he would literally spend hours playing kind of, keep it up. Yeah. Just be kind of bouncing the ball on his foot till he could do it 1,000 times without dropping the ball. And he would do that until basically his father came home.
Yeah.
And when his father came home, they'd go to the park and they'd play football. And he would practice free kicks. And when he was sort of trying to do that, one of the things he started doing then was he'd set up a hoop, like a hula hoop, and try and get into the ball against the wall of the garage. Just constantly just practicing. And he probably did. I can't remember the exact figure in the book, but you're talking tens of thousands of kicks, possibly even hundreds of thousands of kicks.
Yeah.
Hours and hours and hours. Every day of the week. Probably, I don't know what, 50, 60 hours a week of practice.
Yeah, but then to do that and to have the will to do that and the drive to do it, I think if anything, that's the talent.
Yes.
Yeah, you need to have, doesn't matter what it is, you need to have that drive, that passion. I think if you truly want something, you're going to be able to do it. If you want to be a doctor, a dentist, engineer, a cartographer, whatever, if you want to learn to speak a different language, if you want it enough, you can do it. Anything can be learned.
Yeah.
What I do is not magic. It's just a series of skills that are transferable. And then I get the next question is like, yeah, but you're very creative. Well, so I'm creative because I've thought about it and I've drawn it 10,000 times because I love it. As I love to see a shape come out, and it's not just one shape. I'm carving one of 10,000 shapes that are all in my head at that time. So it's just a combination of all these things and all the books I've looked at, all the studies I've looked at, all the natural inspirations I've looked at. And because they're never far from my thoughts, when I start to carve something, I'll be like, oh, look, I see that. When I start carving a tree, I don't know what I'm going to carve. I just start cutting bits off. And as I'm cutting bits, I'll stop and I'll go and look back and I'll go cut another piece off and it's like, oh, well, shouldn't have cut that piece off. Then I cut another piece off and I realize like, oh, that's perfect. And then I'll run into like a big void inside the tree and I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? And I'll stop again and I'll look and I'll turn it upside down if I can move it. And then just keep carving away. It's one of the fundamentals of most of the things in nature is going to be a natural S shape, and nature works a lot in threes, so it's like or thirds. So you could say, and if you can kind of keep those ideas in your mind, so whatever you're carving, ideally you're looking for thirds, like our faces are thirds. It's hands, flowers, tree. There's so many things that follow this rule. Then you've got the Fibonacci sequence, which is the spiral. Throw that in there. Then you think of the odd forms of like flowers, which are so irregular that they're perfectly regular. So irregularity can become a common feature. And throwing that into the mix, it's so I don't think creativity necessarily is a natural talent either. It's accumulation of passion and looking at a lot of different things and being able to keep them fresh in your head, and wanting to turn that into something that you've made. So it's is there natural talent? Yes, I've seen some people pick up a pen and draw something for the first time and do a better job of it than I. But they're not drawing the Mona Lisa. They might just draw an apple that looks more like an apple. But with time, they could potentially develop that into something pretty exceptional. Yeah. Some people are more coordinated. They might be able to juggle a ball better. They might be able to hold a knife better, might have better penmanship skills.
Hand-eye coordination, spatial awareness. I think
and
these
that
are all
might
things
as well be transferable skills that we talked about before.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, some people are better at maybe learning languages, but maybe they're better at learning languages because they were open to that from the time they were quite young. And it's maybe they knew somebody who spoke a different language, or their parents were different languages, or maybe they just have an ear for rhythm.
I mean, I think these are things that make educational research so difficult. You know, like the idea of your perfect pitch. Well, what does it mean musically to have that perfect ear, to be able to hear a note and say, okay, that's a thing? And the research that's gone into it, we can't really say, there's these couple of genes here. If you've got these couple of genes, then you're going to have perfect pitch. It as you say, it's more likely that actually, there was an exposure to music in a certain way from a very young age, where maybe there was and one of the best musicians I ever knew as a teacher. Fantastic musician. In fact, the two brothers, 5 years apart, 4 or 5 years apart. Both could go on to be, top-notch musicians. Not just kind of in an orchestra, but lead violin or lead sort of instrument, if not solo. And you kind of look into the kind of family background. There's a family background of music, and they've been exposed to high-end classical music since they were babies, and probably even while they were in the womb.
Yeah,
because that's the nature of the family. And so, yes, they had perfect pitch because they've been exposed to it. But I think there's also elements of some people may never have that because of maybe a genetic difference, not necessarily a defect.
Nature versus nurture, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think, which I think is always it's a bit of both. Because David Beckham, yes, he took the time to practice thousands of hours, but he also had perhaps enough of genetic advantage for sport, spatial awareness. Well, not necessarily spatial awareness, because again, that can be taught. But again, we're not really sure 100%, and it probably isn't 100% one thing or another. But he's also had the ability to perhaps enough genetic luck, because there is an element of luck, to be able to develop certain musculature and endurance. Parents probably weren't chain smokers that kind of led to
also
kind of
he was out playing around, running from the time he could walk. Being egged on by his peers. It's rather than being inside playing an Xbox for 10 hours a day. So it's I think there's so many little things that lead up to what you can eventually become. It's like, for me, I did not do any woodwork really before I was in my 30s, but I worked in construction quite a lot, and managed construction a lot, and I knew what was good work and what wasn't. So when I started, and I worked with very high-end carpenters and masons, and I could look at something and say, okay, that's not what I wanted, or that's not a good job. So when I started to get into it, I held myself to the same level, and if it wasn't to that same level, I just thought it was rubbish. But rather than get frustrated with it, well, that's not true. I did often get frustrated with it, but rather than give up on it, I just think, okay, well, why is it bad, and what can I do to make it better, and what tool can I use now, or is the tool I'm using good enough, or I just cannot use the tool. And a lot of the time I was not using the tool properly. And so I went, like most people, I went in with like, okay, this is a saw. This is how you saw. I saw things when I was 2. I can saw. Or this is a hammer. I know how to hit things. Or a screwdriver or a chisel. Turns out I didn't know how to do any of it. And it was a difficult and often quite bloody lesson. Learning how to use chisels, learning how to make them sharp, learning saws.
Still got all your fingers though?
Got all my fingers. And remember, I did say that I had one impacted. This one actually got sent into my hand when a oil rig basically fell on it at 90 meters underwater.
Yikes!
But it was now it's all good. No feeling in it, but it's there and it works. So anytime I make something, you can even see the scarring up there. It was so it degloved as well. So it's when the bone went inside, but the flesh didn't. That was not fun.
No, especially 90 meters down, and then having to decompress as well.
Yeah, so I was on an oil rig in the Gulf, and I was welding anodes onto the bottom of an oil rig. And I like to say oil rig fell on it, but it's not really true. We were using like a airlift sled. So the anodes we were doing, which prevents like corrosion, they weighed 50 kilos. So you couldn't carry one. So you'd have this sled, which was pulled by 2 wires on either side of the oil rig. You'd have somebody on a winch, and they'd pull it. You just kind of guide it, get into position. Then you put air to it, and it sticks up onto the bottom of the oil rig, and you then weld it on. While I was down there putting something into position, there was a shift change, and somebody hit the lever that puts air to this sled, and basically the sled provides 1,000 kilograms of lift, so it really gets it in there solid. It clears off barnacles one time, and you can just weld it almost immediately. So I'm pulling this sled with my arm to assist the cables, and all of a sudden I felt it raise, and I pulled my hand out. I just went like this, and the sled and the rig just went, and I got my hand out, and I was in a lot of pain. And after, when the adrenaline kicked in, I'm diving by myself, because that's the way we operated back then. It was a single diver with emergency divers on the surface. Very bad to do that kind of thing now. But I looked at my hand. I'm wearing like multiple layers of gloves, except this glove, the glove finger was there, but there was nothing in it. So I'm like, irrationally thought, well, I've cut my finger off. I'm like, well, if I thought about it, I realized, well, I can't cut my finger off if the finger of the glove is still there.
Yeah.
So I talked to the surface, said I'm hurt. So we have an elevator underwater. I get to the elevator, and there's no in-water decompression back then. You do it on the surface. So you get to this elevator, they start hauling you up from 90 meters like a fish, and you need to strip off all your gear. So by the time you get to the surface, you're just in a dive helmet and your skivvies. They strip your helmet off, you get into a chamber, and they put you under pressure. All that has to be done within 5 minutes, or you're going to die. Yeah. You basically, your blood's going to fizz like as if you shook up a Coke. The only bit that made it even trickier was I was the medic for the rig. So I had to get them to put my medical kit into the chamber. And there are certain things you can't take into a chamber because it's an oxygen-rich environment.
High oxygen, yeah.
Yeah, so they had to take out a bunch of the stuff from my medical kit. Unfortunately, they took out a lot of the stuff that I needed at the time. And we didn't have, there's usually like a little chamber that you can get food to people inside a decompression chamber. Ours didn't have one. So I had to make do with whatever I could find in my bag. But I cut off my glove because I'm still there. I'm bleeding everywhere. I cut off my glove, and there's just nothing there. It was like this. So I'm like
the broken arm in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah, except there's no the finger's not there. The whole skin, everything is inside my hand. So I'm showing this to the little porthole, and they now have to call a helicopter to come and get me. And as I'm there, I'm kind of like playing with it, and my finger just went boop and popped out. And I was that was not good either.
I can imagine that. I can almost feel the colour drain from you just in describing that again.
Yeah. But no, then helicopter flight, surgery, lots of drugs. I was okay. Thankfully, that was one of many, many very lucky escapes I've seemed to have had in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's.
So with your experience in welding, would you ever be inclined to maybe shift from sculpting in wood to sculpting in metal?
I'd love to, but I'm a really rubbish welder. You put me underwater where no one's ever going to see what I'm welding, I'll weld something for you.
It just has to stick. Yeah.
So here's a question with the underwater welding, because it's
sure.
My understanding of it is that you basically feel all of it while you're there.
Oh yeah, you get shocked all the entire time.
Yeah,
because we used to do welding. the level of being shocked is going to be relative to how much insulation is on the cable that you're using. But with commercial diving, you're wearing a helmet with a face plate and visor, and you have a little nozzle for you to clear your ears, like a little U shape. Imagine a U shape on a stick, and you can push it back and forth. One of the first times I was, they're normally covered with rubber. One of the first times I was welding diving, I'd used somebody else's helmet. Didn't notice that their nose piece didn't have any rubber on it. So go in there and clear my ears, and it's just touching my nose here. And what you do is you go down there, and they have control of the electricity on the surface. So you go, you get set up, you have your rod in the little gun, and you tell them to make it hot. So they do like this electric chair switch.
Yeah.
And the first time you smell your nostril hairs burning because your nose is just being electrocuted, that's fun. Yeah.
Because it's basically arc welding, isn't it, that you're doing?
It's just like regular welding. It's just with an insulated cable. But it's that's actually not the there's one that will trump that, and that's burning underwater. So a lot of time when we're cutting steel, we'll use something called a broco rod, which is you're burning with hydrogen. And so you've got a rod. It's quite thick, and it's got magnesium strips inside it, I believe. And with a mixture of oxygen coming through it, you put electricity through it, it lights, it burns at 10,000 degrees. I can cut through 10 inches of steel in seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd go and cut down piles or remove rudders, chain, anything in seconds. That current from that one is definitely a lot stronger. But it's only on for like a second. So there'll be some times, and again, it depends on how much insulation you've got on the cable. I mean, normal, when I've done it recently, like in the last decade, it's fine. They've eliminated all that problem. But when you're working in the Gulf of Mexico for a dodgy dive company, and you're having to drag these cables across barnacles, and they get stripped and shredded, so there's exposed metal everywhere, you get a little fried. So what you do is you get ready to burn something, and you grit your teeth really hard, and you tell them to make it hot, and then you be like, and try to light this thing.
There's no straight welds anywhere. It's all...
And they'd be burning, and you'd be like, huh. And then you do your job. And then the rod runs out in 2 minutes, and you do it again.
Yeah, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's all stick, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, so when I did I've always been a very big runner, and I love to do these obstacle course races. And we went to Wales, a group of us went to Wales to do one of these Tough Mudder runs. Mudder runs is like, it's 13 miles of obstacle course races and barbed wire and unpleasantness. And a few of the obstacles are you actually run through like a gauntlet of wire. And each of those wires is got a bit of a shock to them. But the first one we were going through, it was like a low crawl with these little wires. And before we came to the obstacle, we were watching what other people were doing. And people were getting zapped, and they were crying, and they were screaming, and they're like running away from it, which didn't fill us with a lot of confidence to go and do this obstacle. But then there were some small children who were also doing it, who were like, what are you guys upset about? And touching these wires. So when I went through, the guy in front of me kept getting zapped. So I was like, okay, this is in your head. So I went and touched, I just grabbed one. And it does make a zap, but there was no cut. There was no power to it. Because obviously they couldn't do something that's going to hurt people on an obstacle course race. But it did make a great sound. So people were responding to the sound rather than to the feel. So then we were going through it. We were like messing with it. So we were walking through these things and just like rushing our hands through it, like pop, 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 pop. So people thought we were a little crazy. But maybe could be because I've spent years being slightly electrocuted underwater.
I was going to say it's possible.
I made it slightly immune. It could explain my hair loss too.
Yeah, I've seen. I haven't done an obstacle race, and I'm never going to do one now. But am I saying that you see people doing them with kind of ex-veterans with no legs and
all the time,
pulling themselves around? It's like, what's my excuse?
Neither of us have got any excuse there. I think, Andy.
Yeah, not really. I think that Tough Mudder were the first to do the electrical cable, though. The one up in Staffordshire, which I can't remember the name of. I've mentioned it before on the show.
Well, the whole Tough Mudder thing is a real story of infamy and duplicity, because the Tough Mudder was not an original race. It was a guy. Well, I don't know if I can say this. There's allegedly that a person stole the concept from another person who'd been doing the race for many years, who'd kind of taken him in as a apprentice and son. And when the annual competition opened, this other person opened their event on the same day, in multiple countries, with potential banners flying over. It's like, you think that's difficult? Come and do this one.
Yeah.
And there was a big lawsuit about it. I think probably a lot of broken hearts about it too. It's possible that the young guy who pulled off this thing got kicked out of Harvard for it, and had to pay a huge undisclosed sum to somebody else.
Yeah,
but it's I don't know that for a fact.
But there's a British guy who's been doing it for decades.
Yeah,
much longer than any of the kind of the big name, but Tough Mudder, Spartan, and whatever. Yeah. Basically, he's just a psycho up in Staffordshire as a farm, and just builds this obstacle course and just kind of challenges people to see if they can manage.
He's ex-military, isn't he? He's a colonel or a major, I think.
Not sure, but it's a lot of ex-military. It started out predominantly as military guys going to do it before it became
one of his obstacles. I never quite liked the idea of doing one of his ones, because a lot of his obstacles feature nettles.
Yes, that's the guy.
I don't like nettles.
Yeah.
I'll take electricity.
He'd do there'd be the nettles, but there'd also be things like he ran different types of events. So one of them, the one that kind of sticks to my mind was literally last man standing. And so they had this race, and literally the people would take part, and they would just keep going. And I think he used to run a winter and a summer one, and the winter one, there's some great YouTube. I'll see if I can find one and put it in the show notes. There's a great clip of the guy who won it. He's basically, if anyone knows anything about hypothermia, this guy is in serious hypothermia. He's how he's still standing and not unconscious is just a testament to the grit that he's got.
Grit,
yeah. I mean, they just keep going. Literally, there was just two of them going, and I think they kept going for like an hour or something with just the two of them. And literally got to the point they had no clue where they were. They were just on automatic pilot of just keep moving till one collapsed.
Even that the determination to do that, it takes a lot of work, especially running around in a circle.
Yeah,
and you're just competing with this other. By that time, when you get to that point of exhaustion, you don't see anything else, and all you can focus on is your very next step and the step of the person next to you.
Yeah,
and it's just that you get to the point almost where it's the only thing that's going to stop you is you pass out or die or win.
Yeah,
and it's you become so streamlined, so focused that your own self-care no longer matters.
I remember reading an article, but this is going back into the 1990s, Jimmy, about an event called the Decca Triathlon.
Yeah.
It was a 10x Ironman.
Okay.
So the whole idea was I can't remember what the swim length for a full Ironman is, but yeah, it was 10 times that.
Okay.
And they did it in a pool. Then it was 10 times the length of cycling. Then it was 10 times the length of running. So they were running 260 miles.
Mm.
And it was just, obviously this was done with support teams. And this particular article was interviewing this one particular guy who'd taken part in it, British guy. And at one point, the cycling was done. It wasn't done on open roads. It was done on kind of a closed park.
Yeah.
So obviously safer. At one point, he was swimming back and forwards. He was cycling.
Mm.
And his sort of support team, they could observe quite easily from being all contained. When he got to the sort of next sort of check and kind of feeding station, why were you swerving? And this was like because it'd be like 1,100 miles or something. They had to cycle. I mean, this is absolutely nuts as an event. He said, well, these gravestones kept popping up in front of me, so I had to go around them. He was so knackered. He was hallucinating. It's just like.
I mean, in fairness, for that as a thing, to do the swimming, if you were doing that on a boat, and then to do the cycling if you were on a motorbike, and then to do the running if you were just in a car, those distances are still massively fatiguing for the average human being.
Yep.
To be physically moving them as well.
Try and run it.
Well, there's a great British running and cycling race that go by the same name, which is the Joggle, which is Johnathon to Land's End.
Mm.
And they do it as both a running and a cycling race. The cyclists do not do it much faster than the runners do.
Yeah.
It is an 800-mile plus race. And some of these guys are running 60 to 80 miles a day.
Yeah.
Back to back.
Every day. Yeah.
And it's just, they're machines, really. Because they can take a lot of time a slightly more direct route than some of the cyclists can. But they go through the moors, up mountains. Like imagine fell running times 10.
Yeah.
And I would like to do it one day on a bicycle. I once had dreams of running it, like not as a race, but just like take a month out and do it.
Yeah.
But it's I don't think that's ever going to be an option now.
I used to fancy doing the entire coastal part of the UK on foot.
Yeah,
that was one I always fancied doing.
I was doing the Southwest Coast path because that's down where I live. I would have my previous partner would drop me off somewhere and I would run 10, 15, 20 miles to the next point. Because I ideally wanted to do the entire Southwest Coast path, but that did not, that became unfeasible. Once you get, 50 miles out from Plymouth and you realize you've got 700 miles more to go. Yeah. It's just like, maybe not. I'll look at pictures instead.
And some of the coastal path, particularly down Dorset, is just absolutely destroying the kind of.
Yeah, it's very up
and then down again, then back up again, then down again, and steps that are kind of just not quite the right size to be easy, because there's literally some parts of the south coast near Dorset is literally there are steps on the paths.
Yeah.
You can't go off the path because you're either going to fall into the sea or it's just too steep.
Yeah.
So steps have been cut. I remember doing a bit of down there, and there was this 2 hills in a row where the steps, maybe it's just my particular height, to step up, your knee was bending over kind of 90 degrees. So you're going kind of from vertical.
So like a giant step.
So it was literally doing a kind of one-legged squat every step. Yeah, and I do it with a rucksack on as well. So it's just like that particular trip was a hard one. That was crazy. But
Yeah.
there are plenty of people do these crazy trips, though. Yeah, like it's all about fell running. I mean, it's on the round all the kind of 3,000 footers in the Lake District or North Wales. And it's just like, and you just look at the times at which they do.
Well, you see some of the guys, they go and do the 10 tours or Snowdonia. It's like, oh yeah, I did it in 15 hours or this. It's like, yeah, these guys did it in an hour, and they ran it straight up the side, and they ran straight down the other side, and somehow didn't die. It's they're very impressive. I find fell running is the most impressive running. I think it's outside of running in the sand or the desert. I think it's probably the most hardcore running I've seen.
It's watching good fell runners go downhill is one of the most impressive things. I used to be good at uphill. I used to be able to kind of overtake people going uphill often.
Yeah.
But I had a massive fear of kind of going downhill. When I used to mountain bike, it was the same. I could overtake people climbing, but then downhill, I just didn't have the. It was more about the guts, because fell runners will literally be going full pelt. They'll be sprinting down.
Oh yeah, no control. They're completely past stopping.
Yeah,
and it's like I say, where is that ridiculous chase of cheese down the mountain?
Gloucester. Yeah, Gloucestershire. Yeah.
So you see, it's like people doing that, but successfully.
Yes.
So they're running straight down there, but making it look easy.
Be the people, not the cheese.
Yeah, of course, there is no cheese involved when they actually do the fell run, but it's
maybe that's what they embrace, is they imagine the cheese that they're chasing down the hill, and that's the only focus that they have. Maybe.
To be fair, I'm actually still amazed that's allowed in this country. with all the health and safety and everything, it's like, oh, that's not a regulation cheese.
It will be. The cheese will definitely be regulation. Yeah, the cheese itself will definitely be regulation.
Well, there must be a safety assessment. What if the cheese goes into the crowd? Is the cheese moldy? It's is it gluten free? Is it? Were any nuts used in the making of this cheese?
That's chasing the cheese. Yeah.
Yeah, that just.
Yes, hello. Hi. I'm getting impatient people here.
Well, perhaps we should move on to our attention grabbers. So kind of towards the end of the sort of the podcast, we ask people what's been grabbing their attention lately, which can be absolutely anything, whether it's something you're working on, something you're about to work on, something you've watched, something you've read, film, music. Doesn't really matter. Just what's been grabbing your attention.
I don't even know where to start. It's I look at Instagram quite a bit, and I see some truly amazing things and amazing people carving things. It's like you had on a couple of people you've had on here. Andy's incredible. It's I love his drive and passion for carving things and being creative and using his tools. Lindsay was on. She's amazing. I actually I regret I missed a chance to meet her at Makers. It was Makers this year was a bit manic, and I didn't really get a chance to go and meet as many people as I'd have liked. There are so many people out there just doing and making incredible things. I get lost down the rabbit hole quite often. It's whether it's I step back a little bit from watching YouTube, making makers on YouTube, just because I get too caught up into it and I get distracted from whatever I'm trying to do. Because like this morning I started watching somebody making a live edge table out of like the worst piece of whatever. And I like their concept, and it's like, well, maybe I would have done this and this and this. So I started planning on how I'm going to do it, and I'm just like, no, I'm not doing a table. So it's.
I suffer quite badly with that as well.
Table with Mobius strip legs.
Well, don't give me bloody ideas. I'm actually working on a Mobius strip bench.
Ooh, nice.
Out of a big log. So we'll see if the idea gets taken and if it gets commissioned. If it doesn't, I might just make a small one for my house. Just so I can see if I can do it. Because once it's in my head, I have to do it. Recently, I've been trying to teach myself piano, which is I love music, and I love classical piano. And when I was going through my grief and my mourning, I listened to a lot of Ludovico Einaudi, who is just his work is deceptively simple and complex at the same time.
One of my favorite modern classical.
Yeah, he's just incredible, and it's what he does and the emotion that he can bring out in you is just incredible. And I was like, I would love to even do a 10th of that. So my son, he's into piano, so we have a piano. It's like, okay, I can do this. Turns out, not everything you really want to do is going to be possible when you've had, I don't know, 7 broken fingers over your lifetime. It's it's some of them are quite.
Learn to play with your toes.
Yeah, that is actually might be as good. No, but again, it's that passion.
It just takes more grit and determination.
Yeah, it's the passion for it.
And foot
I
rest.
love to listen to it. I'm not really that fussed about learning how to play it. Even as much as I want to play it, you have to want to spend that time learning the keys and learning the progression. You can't just go there and start doing Mozart. Well, you could, but not successful. But there's so many different artists I see and I follow, and it's like when it comes to me making sculpture, I'm still working on quite a big one at the moment. I'm actually working on 3 big ones, but I'm already 2 carvings ahead in my head. So when these 3 are done, I've already finished the next 2, and I'm thinking about the next one as well. And anytime I see something that I find, oh, how can I incorporate that? Or that's just beautiful. Or this morning I saw a beautiful flower, and it's like, well, that's just gorgeous. That's perfect. Maybe I can try to create something like that. But then it's like, but no, I have to do some abstract shapes. So, hang on. Maybe I can do some abstract shapes. I don't. So, interesting things I've seen. There's too many to count. There's beauty everywhere.
Yeah.
There's people creating amazing things everywhere. And one of the things I love about Instagram and YouTube is being able to share other people's vision and seeing their path and their trip and what they're creating. And try to give support to it, and maybe reach out. And if I see somebody doing something, which a lot of time I'll just see something that's I'm just like, wow, that's just fantastic, well done. And if somebody's watching and I haven't said that on their Instagram yet, well, keep working at it.
It's so hard to keep up with Instagram, I think, and YouTube. I think it's so. We've talked again. Another thing we've talked about many times. That just being able to, never mind the fact that Instagram doesn't necessarily feed us all the things we want to follow, but just even if it did, it would be impossible to keep up with unless you follow 10 people, 20 people.
Well, I try to. Anytime I see somebody, you're completely correct. Anytime I see somebody's work I like, or I like how they work, I save one of their pictures.
Yeah.
So I can find them later. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the time I don't scroll through Instagram randomly. I scroll through my saved pictures and look to see what the people who I've liked are doing. And then I tend to see a lot more of what I want to see. Mm-hmm. And it's
that's a good tip. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a practical thing for a lot of people, because it's I get inspiration from quite a few few places, quite a lot of them are not woodworking or even sculpture. It'll be a picture of a beach. It'll be the crest of a breaking wave. It'll be a piece of wire rope on a bridge that's bent in a certain way, and it just kind of like catches me. I just like, I love that position, that view of it is just in my head kind of perfect. So I follow loads of different types and different crafts, and it's because there's a certain beauty in all of it. So because there's anything that really stands out to me, ask me again in 5 minutes, and yes, I'll tell you 10. But right at the moment, it's
yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Jamie, what about you? What's been grabbing your attention this week?
Stefan from CNC Kitchen has caught me good and proper with a. It's one of those things where I'd had the idea, and sort of thought, oh, I wonder if. And then he's just had this fantastic knack of doing that every time me or Duncan from Little Hobby Shoppers has thought about something. Almost immediately afterwards, Stefan releases an incredibly detailed, well-researched, well-engineered video that kind of goes into the absolute minutiae of why it would or wouldn't work, and how it does and doesn't work. Yeah. And this time around, it was on extending 3D printer nozzles using nuts, essentially.
Yes,
it's a beautiful, beautiful bit of videography to go into this explanation of and this testing process of all these different configurations of.
He takes a very scientific approach to it.
He does, yeah, and that's part of his profession, is doing that kind of that R&D. But it's just the way he does his videos is beautiful, and it's very good nerdery. So that's been a fantastic one this week, because I've still been doing a lot of prototyping on my secret project. So yeah, that's been my bit of fun. How about you, Andy? What's been grabbing your attention?
Apart from melting, or trying not to melt, which is for anyone who was watching earlier today when I was kind of posting, deleting, because I kept messing up Jonathan's name and spelling of it.
Yeah, sorry, my mom took the most common name in the world and made it complicated.
But there's multiple spellings of Johnathon particularly. Then I left the T out Whittaker as well. Yeah. And I know a variety of Jonathans, and most of them are Jonathans, without their H as well, or without two H's. So it was just been a melty day. I've
had arguments with people before about how my name should be spelled. And it's like, I mean, like the passport office, and they're like, "That's not how you spell Jonathan." It's like, I didn't choose this spelling. It's on the paper, just do it.
Yeah.
Read the letters, put them in the right order. That's all you need to do.
But apart from that,
you were on holiday, right?
Me on holiday?
Yeah.
Well, kind of. I'm always on holiday. Yeah.
Bloody teachers.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a professional teacher anymore. I mean, I'm getting into the tutoring. So.
You're getting back into it in a way.
You don't teach piano, do you?
No. I've got the hands for it. I've got a good kind of year, but no. Perhaps should have done. But yesterday I did a bookbinding workshop. So I did one about 3 weeks ago, and I did another one yesterday. Did a different style of binding. It was nice because the place we were at, it was 22 degrees all day, which was just wonderful. Till I stepped into the outdoors at the end of the day, about 6 o'clock, and it was 34 degrees, and it was just like, whoa. But it was a lovely day. Brain was functioning perfectly because it was 22 degrees, and made a book and had some really great conversations and some great food. So it was a fantastic day. So bookbinding. Yeah, apart from that, not really much else. Just melting. Yeah. At that point, where can people find you, Jonathan? What's the best place for people to look out for your work?
You can find me at my Instagram. So it's that's usually the best place to find me. I post there pretty much every day, which is my name, Johnathon Whittaker. Or you can just Google Johnathon Whittaker and I'll pop up, usually for YouTube or for the NHS plaques or for wood carving sculpture.
Or as an actor, as I discovered before.
Yeah, that one's not me.
If you spell your name like a normal person spells it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a there's another so-and-so out there whose mother gave him the bloody name and the last name. No, it's people get it's like I get been often asked this, like, am I related to Johnathon Whittaker the actor? I'm like, well, what are the odds of that? Yes, that's my brother. He's a Jonathan as well.
The same name. Yeah.
Yes.
Same name. We just differentiate with the spelling. It's
it's no. It's like anybody with the last name Whittaker. It's like, oh, well, we must be related. It's like, oh, possibly not. No, maybe we're just not, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
But so YouTube, Johnathon Whittaker, or Carved by Hand. Looking for my stuff. Quite a few of the galleries in the Southwest carry my work, although we've lost 9 galleries recently. 9 galleries have gone out of business. As I was mentioned before,
COVID, do you think?
That now it's I think it's just the people aren't spending money in galleries because they're still spending the same amount of money. Art is actually more art selling than normally is, but galleries themselves are shutting down, which is a real shame.
Yeah.
It can be quite difficult as an artist to go to a gallery and they take 40 or 50% commission of what you're, or they charge a 40 to 50% commission, but it's they have the shop, they put the man hours in, they do the advertising, so it's, I don't begrudge them. And at the end of the day, if you want to be a professional artist, it's a job.
Yeah.
And there are you have to have a thick skin and you have to be able to, sell your stuff. It's if you can't sell your stuff, you're not going to be able to make a living out of it.
Yeah.
But like, unfortunately, there does seem to be the death of galleries recently, which is a shame because it's a great place for people to display art.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, my long-term ambition will be to set up a gallery, like a working gallery, where people could come in and try different crafts from everyone from children to people of a certain age, and they could try painting or pottery or woodwork, bowl turning, sculpture in the same place. And for people who are struggling, one of the most difficult things of being an artist is actually getting into a gallery. Touching on what Andy was saying the other day, there is a whole pretentiousness to it.
Yeah.
That it's if you don't have the lingo right and you don't have the spiel right, regardless what your art's like, you're not going to get into a gallery. It's a lot of the time they don't want to. They don't hear I made it because it was pretty, or I carved it because that's what it needed to be. That doesn't fly. You have to have. There has to be some deeper meaning, deeper connection, which does make sense as well because people who are buying it like to have a deeper connection with the things that they are potentially spending a lot of money on. So it can be tricky getting into that side of it. But if I can say, if people are interested in getting into galleries, I wouldn't say make up a story, but whatever you talk about, make it real, make it personal to you. You can give names to your stuff or not. You can give stories to your stuff or not, but have a reason why. If you think it's pretentious, say so. If you think it's this, don't just say I can't be bothered, because you'll quickly be shown the door. And don't poo-poo the galleries too much, because yes, they can be expensive, but yes, they're one of the only places you're really going to be able to have your work in a location where people can come and see and visit and find you. And remember, just because it's in a gallery doesn't mean it's going to sell. Sometimes, and I hope none of the galleries are listening, so galleries can be a great place to store work. I don't want I've got 6 pieces in here right now.
Especially the size of work you do, yes.
Yeah, I don't really want any more in here, so this collection will go off to a gallery. And yes, I'll have to agree a certain commission, but that doesn't mean it's going to sell. And it could sell privately, or I can move it on to another gallery and I get a better rate. Just because you're putting it into a gallery doesn't mean that they are going to keep it. You could have it there for a week or a month or 10 months or 2 years, or it could sell the same day. And it's all of that is just going to allow you, A, frees up storage, B, gives you some money, lets you move on to the next thing, so on and so forth. And it is quite difficult still for me to let go of some of the things I carve, which is why I liked doing it over Instagram, and it shows because I get to meet the people who buy it a lot of the time, and I often will kind of keep track of them, and they send me pictures. It's like, you've adopted a puppy or something. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's when you put a lot of yourself into making something, there is a connection to it.
Yeah.
So it's that might be, remember that whole artist blab that I carve this because it joins the dichotomy of human nature with the leaf structure or whatever. So maybe that's just my blab. It's this is my puppy. I'm giving it to you. You take care of it because I love it too. And if you're mean to it, I'm going to come for it. But it's
if it works, it works.
Yes. No, but it's hopefully we can get through this whole pandemic thing, and this fuel crisis thing, and this tax crisis thing, and this government crisis thing, and this war crisis thing, and every other crisis thing that we're going through. Because tomorrow's going to be a newer, better, fantastic day with lots of stuff to carve and beautiful things to see and great people to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think on that's probably a good note to say goodbye to people, and they can go and
thank you very much for joining us, Jonathan.
Absolutely.
Jamie, not a problem. Thank you very much for asking me. You too, Andy.
Yeah. It's been really nice chatting to you. And
it's good to actually sit down and have a moment to actually chat.
Yeah, a proper chat. Well, we'll say goodbye to folks now, and we'll see everyone next week. Indeed. Bye, folks.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys.